I'm here! And today we're going to talk about how your memory can influence what you taste in bourbon. I got this question from a follower on social media who asked me to do a video on how memory influences our perception of flavor. Specifically, he was asking about the tasting notes of Angel's Envy. And that is a really great question because what we perceive in our glass is not only what's in our glass, it's also what's in our heads. So let's break this down into the individual components of the Angel's Envy profile. First, there's the vanilla. Now, this is a pretty common tasting note in bourbon, especially in new make. And it makes sense because one of the primary components of vanilla extract is alcohol. And guess what? Bourbon's made with a lot of alcohol. So when you combine alcohol and vanilla, it's like a match made in heaven. That's why you'll often see vanilla extract on the ingredient list for many bourbons. Next, we have the oak. Now, oak is another common tasting note in bourbon, but it's a little more nuanced than you might think. The type of oak used to make the barrel can vary, as well as the level of char on the inside of the barrel. All of this can influence the flavor of the bourbon. So when you're tasting oak, you're really tasting the memory of the barrel. Now, the third taste I want to talk about is coffee. Coffee is not always the first tasting note that comes to mind when you think of bourbon, but it can definitely be present, especially in higher proof bourbons. Now, coffee and bourbon both have a lot of the same flavor compounds, which is why they go together so well. In fact, some people even drink their bourbon with coffee to enhance the coffee's flavor. The next taste I want to talk about is sweet. Now, this may seem like a broad generalization, but there's a lot of different types of sweetness in bourbon. There's the sweetness of the sugar in the molasses that's used to make the mash. But then there's also the perception of sweetness that comes from the other components in the mash bill, like corn and wheat. And then there's the sweetness that comes from the oak. And then there's also the perception of sweetness that comes from the alcohol itself. So when you think of sweet, think of all the different levels of sweetness that can be in bourbon. And the last taste I want to talk about is maple. Now, maple is another one of those broad generalizations, because maple can be sweet, but it can also be savory and even a little spicy. But the reason why maple is such a common tasting note in bourbon is because of the sugar component. Maple syrup is made from the sap of maple trees, and that sap has a very distinct flavor that is often used as a sweetener in foods and drinks. So, the next time you pour yourself a glass of bourbon, take a moment to think about all the different flavors that you're tasting, but also think about where those flavors are coming from. Is it from the bourbon? Or is it from your memory? And if it is from your memory, what memories does that bring up for you? Because, at the end of the day, the memories that we associate with certain flavors can be just as powerful as the flavors themselves. So thanks for watching, y'all. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit that like button and leave me a comment. And if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe.